The morning my granddaughter was born, I cried in the hospital parking lot for 20 minutes before I could walk inside. Not from joy, though there was plenty of that. I cried because I had no one to call. My wife was somewhere in that building, but she was not someone I could call anymore. Not really. Not for 2 years. I just didn't know it yet. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 of those years building a contracting business from a single pickup truck and a handshake reputation. I poured concrete in the rain. I climbed scaffolding in January. I missed birthday dinners and school plays and one Thanksgiving because a client's roof caved in and I was the only one who answered the phone. I did all of that believing I was doing it for my family. I was wrong about who my family actually was. My name is not important. What happened to me is, my wife and I met when we were both 31. She was a dental hygienist working 2 offices. I was just starting out, driving that pickup with a cracked windshield and a prayer. She believed in me before I had any reason to ask her to. We had 1 son together. He turned 34 last March. I'm proud of the man he became, though the road between us got rocky for a while, and that part of the story matters more than I can say. My neighbor, Raymond, has lived next door to us for 19 years. He retired from the post office 11 years ago. Every morning at 6:15 he walks his beagle, Chester, down our street and back. Every Sunday, he waves from his driveway when I get the paper. We have shared a fence, a conversation about lawn fertilizer, and more cups of coffee than either of us can count. He is the kind of man who notices things quietly and says nothing until saying something matters. He is also the reason I am still standing. It started on a Tuesday in October. I had driven my son to the airport. He lives in Denver now, works in logistics, visits when he can. I dropped him at departures, watched him disappear through the sliding doors with his rolling bag, and sat in the cell phone lot for a few minutes, just to let the quiet settle the way it does after someone you love leaves. Then I pulled out and headed home. I was 3 miles from the house when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Raymond. I almost didn't answer. I figured it was about the fence panel the wind had knocked loose the week before. I picked up anyway. He said, "Don't come home yet. Park somewhere and call me back on this number." His voice was flat and careful, the way a man speaks when he is trying not to alarm you while every alarm he has is going off. I pulled into a gas station and called him back. What he told me in the next 4 minutes rearranged everything I thought I knew about my life. Raymond had been walking Chester that morning, earlier than usual because the dog had been restless. It was just past 5:30. As he passed the side of our house, he saw a car he didn't recognize parked at the end of our driveway, not in it, just at the edge, lights off. He thought maybe it was someone making a phone call. He walked on. When he came back 15 minutes later, the car was still there. A man he had never seen before was crouched beside my truck, which I had left at home since my son and I had taken my wife's sedan to the airport. Raymond stopped walking. Chester sat down, which the dog only does when Raymond stops completely. The man beside my truck stood up, looked both ways, and got back in the car. The car left. Raymond went home, got his phone, and pulled up the video from his doorbell camera, which faces at an angle that clips the edge of our driveway. He watched it twice. Then he called me. "I don't know what that man was doing," he said, "but I know it wasn't good. And I know you just left with your son. So whatever it is, he was waiting for exactly that." I sat in that gas station parking lot for a long moment. The fluorescent lights overhead made everything look like a waiting room. I asked Raymond to send me the video. I watched it 4 times. The man was clear enough. Late 40s, gray jacket, unhurried in the way of someone who has done something like this before. He reached under the rear wheel well of my truck. He stayed crouched for about 40 seconds. He didn't look nervous. I thought about what could be placed under a wheel well in 40 seconds. I did not go home. I drove to a diner 2 towns over and sat in a corner booth with coffee I didn't drink and thought about what I actually knew versus what I was afraid of. I am a methodical man by nature. 31 years of contracting will do that to you. You learn early that reacting to what a problem looks like instead of what it actually is will cost you time, money, and sometimes a client's roof. So I thought carefully. My wife and I had been distant for 2 years, not fighting, just the particular silence of people who have stopped being curious about each other. I had told myself it was normal. I had told myself it was age and familiarity, and the way long marriages drift. I had told myself a great many things that I now understood were simply convenient. 3 months before that October morning, I had found a charge on our joint account I didn't recognize. A restaurant I'd never heard of. Twice in 1 week, on days I was out of town for work. When I asked her about it, she said it was lunch with a girlfriend. I believed her. I was embarrassed later about how quickly I believed her. Now I sat in that diner and I thought about the man crouching beside my truck. And I thought about the restaurant charges. And I thought about the way my wife had started keeping her phone face down on every surface. And I thought about my son, who had mentioned on the drive to the airport that his mother seemed different lately. His word, different, said carefully, the way adult children speak when they are trying not to take sides. I thought, I have been the last to know something that everyone around me has already begun to understand. I called Raymond back and asked him a question I had not expected to ask anyone that day. I asked him if he would let me look at everything his doorbell camera had captured over the past 60 days. He said, I already started pulling it. That is the kind of neighbor Raymond is. I did not go home that night. I told my wife I was staying over at my foreman's place because we had an early pour the next morning. She said, fine. No questions. No, be careful. No, I'll leave the light on. Just fine. I drove to Raymond's house and we sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and 2 glasses of water, and we went through 63 days of footage from his doorbell camera. What we found did not come all at once. It came the way damage usually comes in layers, each one worse than the one before. The gray jacket man had been to our driveway 4 times in 60 days. Always on mornings when I was known to be out of town. Always early, before 6. The second and third visits were shorter. The first visit was 11 minutes. We watched him walk to my truck, stand beside it, make a phone call, and walk away. The fourth visit, the one from that morning, was the one where he crouched down. At 2 in the morning, Raymond went to bed. I sat at his kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down every date I had been out of town in the last 60 days, then matched them to the footage. Every single visit lined up. Someone had my travel schedule. The only person outside my business who had my travel schedule was my wife. I want to be honest about what that realization felt like, because I think people sometimes describe betrayal as a sudden thing, a lightning strike, a door slamming. For me, it was slower. It was like watching the floor of a room you have lived in for 30 years slowly tilt. Everything familiar, everything unchanged. But the angle wrong in a way that makes you understand the structure was never what you thought it was. I did not sleep. In the morning, I called a man I had known for 20 years, a retired sheriff's deputy who now did private investigation work. I told him I needed to know what was under my truck before I touched it, and I needed someone who knew how to document it properly. He met me at a body shop owned by a mutual friend. We put the truck on a lift. Taped to the inside of the rear wheel well, in a magnetic case, was a small plastic bag. The investigator photographed everything in place before touching it. He called a contact at the county sheriff's office. 2 deputies came to the body shop. The bag was logged and taken into evidence. The deputies ran the plates from Raymond's footage. The gray jacket man had a record. 2 prior arrests for drug-related offenses in a neighboring county. He was known, it turned out, to a man named Derek Cole, a name I did not recognize that afternoon but would come to know very well. Derek Cole was 51 years old. He owned a landscaping company. He had been in what I can only describe as a relationship with my wife for 14 months. I know the exact length because of the emails. My wife used a laptop we had bought together 5 years earlier, which sat on a desk in what we called the office, a small room off the kitchen I used maybe twice a week for invoices. She had her own login. I had mine. I had never looked at anything of hers. I am not a man who reads other people's correspondence. I was raised to believe privacy inside a marriage was as important as trust. That belief had made me very easy to deceive. But when my investigator with proper legal guidance, using a process I will not go into here, was able to document the contents of an email account, what came back was 416 messages between my wife and Derek Cole, spanning 14 months. I did not read all of them. I read enough. They had discussed, in plain and specific language, the following: my travel schedule, my truck, Derek's contact, and what they described as the plan. The plan, as best I could understand it, was to have the drugs found under my truck during a traffic stop, one that would have been arranged, the emails suggested, through a connection Derek had. The goal was not just to have me arrested, it was to use an arrest and the resulting disgrace to accelerate a divorce in which my wife would have maximum leverage over our shared assets, including the business I had built for 3 decades. There was a line in one of the emails I have not been able to forget. My wife wrote, "Once that's done, he won't have anything left to fight with." I read that sentence standing in my investigator's office at 4 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I set the paper down on his desk. I looked out the window at a parking lot and a fast food sign and a strip of gray October sky. I thought about my son. I thought about what this would do to my son. That was the part that nearly broke me. Not the betrayal itself, though it was real and it was deep, and I will not pretend it wasn't. But my son, 34 years old, living in Denver, just starting to find his footing in a life that hadn't been easy. He had grown up watching me work. He had grown up believing his parents' marriage was something solid. He had mentioned, on the drive to the airport, that his mother seemed different. He had been trying to protect me by saying very little. He deserved to know the truth, but he deserved to hear it from me. Carefully, not from a courtroom or a newspaper or a phone call in the middle of a workday. I called him that evening. I told him I needed to tell him some things, and that I needed him to let me get through all of it before he said anything. He let me get through all of it. There was a long silence on the line when I finished. Then he said, "Dad, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. I should have said something sooner." I told him he had done exactly what a good son should do. He had noticed. He had told me, in the careful way he had. The rest was not his to carry. He flew back the next weekend. He sat at Raymond's kitchen table with me and my investigator and a family law attorney. He did not waver once. My wife was served papers on a Monday morning in November. By that point, my investigator had turned over everything to the sheriff's department. Derek Cole was arrested 2 days later. The gray jacket man had already been picked up. He had, apparently, not been told that the plan had collapsed and was attempting to claim the bag had nothing to do with him. It did not go well for him. The civil proceedings took 7 months. I will not walk through every filing and hearing. It was exactly as exhausting and grinding as you might imagine, and there were days when I sat in my attorney's waiting room and felt nothing except a great hollow tiredness. But I want to be clear about the outcome, because I think people who have been through something like this deserve to know that outcomes can be real and they can be fair. My wife received none of the business. She received her share of the marital assets as defined by 31 years of joint contribution, which was fair and which I did not contest, because I am not a man who fights what is fair. What she did not receive was a destroyed husband, a disgraced father, or a son who turned away from me. Those were the things she had been counting on. Derek Cole was convicted. The gray jacket man took a plea. My wife faced her own legal exposure for her role in what the prosecutor called a conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction. She negotiated a settlement that involved full cooperation, significant fines, and a period of supervised probation. I am told she has since moved to another state. I do not keep track. What I kept was my business, my reputation, which in 31 years had never once been questioned, and which, because of Raymond and a doorbell camera and a man who noticed something wrong at 5:30 in the morning, was never touched. My son, who calls me every Sunday now without fail, and Raymond, who still walks Chester past my house every morning at 6:15 and who has never once asked me for anything in return for what he did. I have thought a great deal about why Raymond called me instead of looking away. I asked him once, about a year after everything settled down. We were sitting on his back porch in July, watching the last of the light go out of the sky. He said, "I've known you 19 years. I know what a man looks like who builds things honestly and treats people right. I wasn't going to let somebody dismantle that from under a wheel well at 5:30 in the morning." That was all he said. Then we watched the fireflies come up in the yard, and Chester put his head in my lap, and we sat there in the kind of quiet that belongs only to people who have been through something together and come out the other side. I am not the same man I was before that October morning. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I am more careful now, in ways that feel earned rather than fearful. I trust more slowly and more deliberately. I notice more. I am less willing to explain away the things that feel wrong in the name of keeping the peace. My son came down last Christmas, the first one we spent together, just the two of us, plus his wife and my granddaughter, who is now 14 months old and has just started walking in that lurching, astonished way that babies walk, as if gravity is a new idea they are still working out. I held her in Raymond's backyard on Christmas afternoon, while she grabbed at the cold air and laughed at nothing in particular. My son stood next to me and said, "She's going to be a handful." I said, "Good. Handfuls figure things out." He laughed. It was the laugh of a man at ease with his father, which is something I once thought I might lose entirely. I did not lose it. I want anyone going through what I went through to know that the things that matter most, the real things, the ones built over years through consistency and showing up and being honest, those things are harder to destroy than the people trying to destroy them believe. The business is doing well. Better than well, actually. I brought my son in as a part owner last spring. He works remotely on the operations side, which suits him and suits me. We talk about invoices and scheduling and crew logistics on Tuesday afternoons. And sometimes we talk about nothing work-related at all, which suits us both even better. I still drive past that gas station sometimes, the one where I pulled in and sat in a fluorescent-lit parking lot and tried to understand what Raymond had just told me. I don't stop, but I notice it every time. It marks something for me. The exact moment where I could have gone home and walked past the truck and never looked under the wheel well. The exact moment where, because one honest man walked his dog a little early and paid attention and picked up the phone, a different story became possible. I think about that often. Pay attention to the people in your life who show up quietly, consistently, without drama or expectation. The ones who wave from the driveway on Sunday mornings. The ones who notice when something is wrong and say so even when it would be easier to say nothing. Those people are rarer than you think and more valuable than almost anything else I can name. I have been in contracting for 31 years. I have built houses, warehouses, commercial spaces, a school gymnasium, and one very complicated custom kitchen that I still consider the finest work my crew ever did. I know how structures are built and how they fail. I know that the visible damage is almost never where the real damage began. I know that foundations matter more than facades. What I have learned in the last 2 years is that this is true of lives too. My foundation held, not because I am exceptional, but because one ordinary man walked his dog before sunrise and noticed something that didn't belong and cared enough about the difference between right and wrong to pick up his phone. That is the whole story. That is, I think, the only story that really matters inside all of it. If you are listening to this and something in your life feels wrong, something you have been explaining away, something that sits at the back of your mind in the quiet moments, pay attention to that feeling. You are probably not wrong, and look around at who is already there, already watching, already the kind of person who would call you from a driveway at 5:30 in the morning. You may already have everything you need,